The first thing that greets you as you walk in is a 1950s bright pink Cadillac Eldorado. This luxury convertible, with its spectacular tail fins running down the sides and protruding at the back, was a favorite of many American celebrities of the era, including Elvis Presley and the boxer Sugar Ray Robinson. Immediately to its left is another beautiful Cadillac, but this one is from 1905 and looks nothing like the Eldorado. It's a product of the days when the early cars were motorized variations of horse-drawn carriages. As you pass the Eldorado and head towards the back, your eyes are drawn left and right by approximately 24 automobiles that now are only ever seen in gangster movies. Another 20 meters and you arrive at a small display of 2 or 3 earlier versions of the cars that we are more used to seeing nowadays. And behind them is a large panel with a mosaic of pictures illustrating the exhibit. At this point you are now well inside Autoworld, the Brussels museum dedicated to the history of the automobile and holding one of the largest collections in the world, only a fraction of which is ever on display. You could be forgiven for choosing to walk up the stairs and explore the next level, but this would be a shame, because behind the panel, in semi-darkness, you will discover a 1916 automobile that could have changed the course of history and could possibly have even helped us avoid the climate emergency. It's a story involving ingenuity, luck, an American industrialist, and his wife. But that story, as always, will come at the end of the episode. Also in today's letter, we take you west to the middle of the Atlantic with the new president of the Committee of the Regions. We take you south to one of the EU's land borders with Africa. We take you north to the Arctic, which has become of great interest to China. And why the new female vice presidents of Renew Europe in the COR are political leaders you need to follow. I'm Sean O'Kearney, and this is Letter from Brussels, bringing you stories about the EU's capital city and about the leaders building the Union from the ground up. It's brought to you by the Renew Europe group in the Committee of the Regions, the European Assembly of Regions and Municipalities. When French President Emmanuel Macron spoke at the plenary of the Committee of the Regions last December, he said, "The pandemic has proved beyond any doubt that Europe needs those who make the Union a reality on the ground. Without local leaders," he added, "it would have been impossible to confront this public health and economic shock that we have had to face." President Macron's presence at a COR plenary followed that of the Prime Ministers of Slovenia and Portugal and of German Chancellor Angela Merkel in 2020. While Europe's political leaders have clearly come to realize they need to work with subnational government, which is responsible for 50% of all public investment, it is also true that the leadership of Apostolos Tzitzikostas was key to securing their presence. Governor of the Greek region of Central Macedonia, Tzitzikostas has presided over the COR for the last 2.5 years, nominated by the EPP group as per the agreement at the start of the mandate between all of the COR's political groups. In recognition of his successful presidency, the Liberal Renew Europe group thanked him with a standing ovation when he came to their meeting to bid farewell. If President Tzitzikostas comes from one of the regions in the EU which is furthest away from Brussels, the new president of the COR comes from a region even further away and in the opposite direction. Vasco Alves Cordeiro is from the Azores, the Portuguese archipelago in the middle of the North Atlantic, made up of 9 volcanic islands about 1,400 kilometers west of Lisbon. They have a fascinating history, including a surprising presence in the 15th century of a large Flemish community. A lawyer by profession, Alves Cordeiro was president of the Azores from 2012 to 2020. He takes on the presidency of the COR, nominated by the Socialist PES group, again as per the agreement between the COR's political groups. You can read more about his plans in the new Living Cities newsletter by the Politico.eu news site. As for Renew Europe, The political agreement reserves, amongst other positions, the presidency of the COR's Economic Affairs Commission, ECON. The new chair will be elected in September. There were also a number of mid-mandate changes within Renew Europe. Ulrika Landergren will be retiring soon after having been a pillar of the group as first vice president for 5.5 years, and a pillar of the COR in this mandate, chairing the COR's Natural Resources and Health Commission in the middle of the pandemic, and as the COR's first ever coordinator for impact oversight. Our new first vice president is Jasna Gabric, mayor of the Slovenian town of Trbovlje. Awarded the title of Mayor of Distinction in 2018 by the World Mayor Foundation, she was the youngest female mayor in Slovenia when she was elected at the age of 29 in 2014. She took on the challenge of modernizing this former mining town that needed a new economic activity, and she was so successful that she was re-elected 4 years later with an incredible 66% of the votes. She can be followed on Facebook and Instagram. Renew Europe's new third vice president is Councillor Kate Feeney from Dunleary Rathdown Council near Dublin. There she chairs the Economic Development Committee. When she was 27, she was elected the first ever female president of OGRA, the youth wing of her party, Fianna Fáil. Last year she took the lead on behalf of the EU's regions and municipalities in supporting equal rights for LGBTIQ+ people. Highlighting the impact discrimination has on the mental health of many LGBTIQ+ individuals, as well as on their rights to live as families throughout the EU, and even for some on simply having a stable home, she called for political leadership that bridges communities and fosters an atmosphere of respect. Councillor Feeney can be followed on Twitter and Instagram. For the full list of positions in the Renew Europe group, visit our website at reneweurope-cor.eu. Coming up in a few minutes, the automobile in a Brussels museum that could have changed the course of history. But first, some news in brief. The co-chair of the Conference on the Future of Europe, Guy Verhofstadt, was at the COR plenary discussing how municipalities and regions can help implement the citizens' recommendations for the future of the Union. In response to the typical accusations from Eurosceptics that the EU is becoming a superstate, he reminded everyone that the EU's budget is a mere 1% of the Union's GDP. This compares with the budget of the United States, which is 30% of its GDP. Worried about the growing cases of anti-Semitism, including in schools, which has led to some teachers avoiding the topic altogether, Anne Rudisouli of the French Department of Bouches-du-Rhône and Dietmar Brockes of the German land of North Rhine-Westphalia made a joint call for school teachers to receive the necessary support to help them accurately and confidently teach about the Holocaust. Vladimir Putin must suffer a defeat in Ukraine. That was the clear message of our Latvian member, Dainis Turlais, who explained that the EU's values of freedom and democracy will only be safe if the Russian invasion ends in failure. And he added that reconstruction of Ukrainian cities must happen fast. In fact, the previous letter from Brussels focused on this topic. It's called Ukrainian Reconstruction and the Alexandrov Ship, and you'll find it on your usual podcast platform. On the 24th of June this year, 2,000 migrants camped in Morocco rushed towards the fence of the city of Melilla, one of the two land borders that the EU has with Africa. Hampered by the fence and pushed back by Moroccan police, the attempt ended with at least 30 migrants dead and hundreds of grieving relatives somewhere in Africa who will never see them again. The Renew Europe president, François de Coster, called on the Czech government, which is taking over the rotating 6-month EU Council presidency from France, to make it a priority to support the two Spanish cities on the African continent, as they are EU borders and are therefore the target of people traffickers. President de Coster who comes from the Hauts-de-France region, where similar tragedies have occurred with migrants trying to cross the Channel to the UK, sent a message to the President and people of Melilla to reassure them that they are not alone and that a European solution is needed. But the EU is not just facing challenges on its southern and eastern borders. The Arctic has become an area of increasing interest for global powers as the ice melts and its wealth of natural and mineral resources becomes accessible. The chair of the city board of the Finnish city of Oulu, Mirja Vekapera, highlighted that China has been showing interest in owning critical infrastructure in the European Arctic, in submarine cable construction, and in Arctic shipping. She added that the EU must invest more in the region, explaining that it has an investment potential of 150 billion euros between now and 2030, much of it linked to the transition to an economy free of fossil fuels. This, she said, was critical because, as the European Commission has concluded, climate change is the main threat to the Arctic. With temperatures there rising 3 times faster than in the rest of the world, melting ice and thawing permafrost have huge consequences throughout Europe and the rest of the planet. One industry that is finding it hard to transition is the automotive industry. The production of electric vehicles is less labor-intensive, and some regions fear a swift rise in unemployment if the transition to electric vehicles happens too quickly. But we cannot delay things further, said Walter Drandic of the Istrian Assembly, who argued that the accelerating pace of disastrous climate change requires a faster decarbonization of the economy, and this, he said, presents new business opportunities to be seized, and he pointed to how the production of electric vehicles has led to the creation of 700 new jobs in Croatia. This now brings us to the story of the car that could have changed history. It's not particularly beautiful. Compared to most of the other cars in the Auto World Museum, it is probably one of the least attractive. But the 1916 Detroit Electric was beautiful in a way we can only appreciate now, after a century of breathing pollution and chucking out CO2 emissions that have ended up poisoning our own planet. The Detroit Electric was unsophisticated. Its design was clearly based on 2/3 of a typical stagecoach cabin, with extensions at the front and the back for batteries and storage. It didn't even have a steering wheel, instead relying on 2 horizontal bars extending from the side in front of the driver. It wasn't fast, even by the standards of those days, but it was considered very convenient, starting up immediately as opposed to the hand cranking that combustion engines needed at the time. It was a favorite amongst doctors who needed to reach their patients quickly. And the founder of a Japanese battery company imported 2 of them to Tokyo, and using his own batteries drove the cars for 29 years to demonstrate the effectiveness of battery technology. Famous owners included the inventor Thomas Edison, the philanthropist John D. Rockefeller Jr., and Clara Ford, the wife of Henry Ford. It was Henry who bought the Detroit Electric for Clara in 1908, the same year that he launched the Ford Model T. It took another 5 years before he and his team introduced the revolutionary assembly line that allowed mass production of the Ford T, and the dramatic reduction of the costs that made it accessible to the average American. Being a combustion engine automobile, the huge success of the Ford T completely killed off the electric car for the whole of the 20th century. We will never know, of course, but had Henry Ford recognized the potential in his wife's car, and had he used his assembly line system to produce an electric vehicle instead of, or as well as, the Ford T, perhaps battery technology would have developed much faster, and perhaps our world would have been less dependent on fossil fuels, and perhaps climate change would have become less of an emergency. If you would like to see pictures of the Detroit Electric and other cars from my recent visit to Autoworld, visit our website at reneweurope-cor.eu/podcast.